After years of begging and pleading, the Snyder Cut is finally here. It was something that seemed so unlikely to ever be seen by the general public. A myth, a tale, a legend. But the Snyder Cut is no longer that. It exists and you can watch it. I loved Man of Steel, check out my video on that film if you haven't already, and I adore BVS. So needless to say, I was very disappointed with the theatrical cut of Justice League. It felt rushed with bad jokes throughout and characters whom I didn't care much about. And it had some terrible, terrible dialogue.
He said that you were the thirstiest young woman he ever met.
The cut felt like a film that was butchered with an uneven tone and didn't feel like the logical next step to BVS. It felt more like an Elseworlds tale. Justice League needed to be a tonal and narrative follow-up to BVS, while also being an epic team-up film. I think Zack Snyder's cut of the film succeeds at this extraordinarily well. The Snyder Cut is beautiful to look at, literally in terms of its cinematography, but also because the film, after all the hurdles it endured, exists. The film manages somehow, some way, to give every single new character an arc, and it manages to wrap up old ones too. Batman's arc started in BVS and concludes here, him learning that he was wrong about Superman, about mankind, about being cruel. He learns to have a little faith. Cyborg learns that he isn't broken and that he isn't alone. The Flash begins the film as a guy with a terrible dead-end job who's stuck in place, but by the end of the film, he's got a job, a good one, and he's made his own future. Aquaman goes from a brooding, depressed solo who's reluctant to be part of a team or of any crew of peoples to someone who actually values one.
I thought you didn't care.
I never said that.
Wonder Woman begins her journey in BVS as someone who left the world of man, but because of the events of BVS and Justice League, she learns that mankind is more than worth saving. And Superman, after his rebirth, fulfills the prophecy Jor-El always knew was intended for him.
They will stumble, they will fall, but in time, they will join you in the sun, Cal. In time, you will help them accomplish wonders.
The arcs presented here are great. Zack Snyder's Justice League is a beautiful film, but it's a beautiful lie. Justice League was always going to be a difficult film to make, not because it's impossible or unfilmable, but because of the expectations that were put on Zack Snyder. Imagine having to introduce 3 new big superhero characters in a film that's a team-up movie and making you as an audience member care about each one of those characters by the time they've joined the league. It's difficult, especially with a film on this scale. Snyder was put in the position of having to introduce the Flash, Aquaman, Cyborg, their mythos, while also telling a story on the resurrection of Superman, introducing us to the villains of Apocalypse, and setting up for future DC films all in one. That's impossible to do in 2 hours flat, while also maintaining a good film. And the Whedon cut of Justice League proves just that. But the Snyder cut at 4 hours does just that. It establishes everyone that hasn't been introduced, makes their characters compelling while also making a story of massive scope. It shouldn't have worked, it couldn't have worked, but it did. Only it managed to work 4 years too late. The Snyder cut was supposed to be released in 2017. The filming of Snyder's cut wrapped in 2016. All the footage WB needed to assemble a workable edit of the film was there, but Warner Brothers panicked at what Snyder was trying to do. The bad reception of BVS made Warner Brothers overthink everything, even though there was already a plan. It's been established that Snyder had a 5-film plan for his arc of DC movies, a narrative that would start in Man of Steel, continue on into BVS, and then into 3 Justice League films. But that plan was canceled. Warner Brothers caved, and when Snyder had to leave production on Justice League to be there for his family after his daughter's tragic suicide, WB took advantage of that and hired Joss Whedon to come in and finish the film. But that's not what Joss did. Joss didn't finish Justice League. He changed it and made it into a completely different film. He took a 4-hour epic, crunched it into 2, removed the epic from it, and just made the film bland and uninteresting, while also adding the terrible CGI removal of a mustache, a bunch of ass shots of Wonder Woman, and terrible jokes.
Like brunch. Like, what is brunch?
And it was missing those Snyder-isms to it. And while that might be welcome to some Snyder haters, the fact of the matter is, Justice League was Snyder's movie, his brainchild. It wasn't Whedon's to mess around with. The mediocre film, the film where the Flash falls on Wonder Woman's titties and where the goddamn Batman says,
Yeah. Something is definitely bleeding.
is what Warner Brothers considers as the definitive Justice League movie. But that film is not Justice League. Zack Snyder's Justice League is, but at a major cost. When looking at it from the perspective that this film is a 2017 film, it makes things really sad in retrospect. I mean, we could have had this by now. We could have had scenes on an epic scale like this long ago. We could have had that and so much more. I'm excited for Matt Reeves' Batman film, don't get me wrong, but it sucks that Affleck left the role, at least officially, because working on the reshoots of Justice League was such a hellhole for him. What's reassuring to know is that Ben Affleck was willing to come back to film an additional scene for the Snyder Cut in 2020. So perhaps Ben isn't completely done as the Batman, at least not as we thought before. One of the films that Justice League was setting up was a solo Batfleck film, a film in which the Batman would fight Deathstroke, and apparently Batgirl was supposed to be involved in it. A film directed, produced, and starring Academy Award-winning Ben Affleck could have existed by now if it wasn't for the terrible time Ben Affleck had during the Justice League reshoots. Now, I'm aware he was already going through a divorce at the time, but I can't imagine the toxic environment of the Justice League reshoots made it any better for him. It probably demotivated him from playing Batman even more. Affleck seems to be in a better place now, and I'm happy for the guy, but the promise of a Batman vs. Deathstroke film for now is just a beautiful lie. You guys remember when Affleck posted this awesome test footage of Deathstroke for the Batman film on his Twitter account and how the internet blew up? Gosh, those were the days. Joe Manganiello trained extensively for the role of Deathstroke, but never got to even really play Deathstroke in any substantial role. And unfortunately, Deathstroke isn't the only villain who's set up in Zack Snyder's Justice League film. Darkseid, one of DC's greatest supervillains, was introduced in the Snyder Cut, portrayed by Ray Porter. He was a tyrant, a world dominator, the ultimate villain for the League to ever face. Now, Darkseid wasn't in the theatrical cut of the film. He was only referenced once as sort of an Easter egg. Hell, he was replaced flat out with Steppenwolf for the flashback sequence. But here, Darkseid plays a huge part. Throughout the film, we can feel his dominating presence over Steppenwolf. The moment where every parademon bows to Darkseid, and when Steppenwolf is scared as hell at the mere sight of him, was awesome to see. It was a great scene. The world building in this film is phenomenal. The threat of a being like Darkseid feels substantial. It feels like something that needs to be prevented, that needs to be stopped. This stare down here where the Justice League looks at Darkseid and his Legion through a boom tube is epic. And when Darkseid says, "Ready the Armada, we will use the old ways," that felt scary, that felt threatening, and that felt like a promise. It was a great moment. And then in the very final scene of the film, Martian Manhunter pulls up to Bruce and is like, "Darkseid is gonna be here, there's a war coming," and that was awesome too. It was setting up a film where the Justice League would fight Darkseid, where the Defenders of Earth would have to reunite as one and protect their world again. But because of Warner Brothers and their flat-out stupidity, the films promised to us by Zack Snyder in Justice League are nothing but lies. The nightmare scene in BVS was awesome. It was a scene that left a lot for interpretation, but at the same time, it could also be seen as something more, something darker. An evil Superman with minions who carried the crest of the House of El on their shoulders, parademons invading the world, a gun-wielding Batman, a dead Lois Lane. Like, what was going on? That scene is greatly expanded upon in this film with some more context. We've got an unrecognizable League here, a dead Aquaman, a dead Wonder Woman, a League where the Joker is on the crew. I mean, tell me more. This exchange between Batman and Joker is fun to watch. It's not Shakespearean dialogue or anything like that, but it's entertaining, and hearing Batman drop the F-bomb was really funny. But then Superman comes in and he's about to wreak havoc, and then what next? The nightmare world is clearly some representation of the future, since the Kryptonian computer showed Cyborg a world where Wonder Woman and Aquaman were dead. And I'm pretty sure that the corpse in Superman's arms there is supposed to be Lois Lane's. And all that lines up with Bruce's nightmare world. The film sets up the idea for the nightmare world to be even further explained in later films. But again, as a result of WB, that just might remain a beautiful lie. There's so much more story in this film that we might never get to see the continuation of. Like Superman and Lois having a child. Where does that story go? The last line of dialogue from Bruce before the epilogue begins is him saying congratulations to Clark. But what then? Does that child die in Lois similar to how it was in the Injustice storyline? Would Snyder really go that dark with the DC universe? I'd be fine if he did, but what sucks is that we don't know the whole story because the story isn't done. The story isn't conclusive. I know there's an exhibit with Snyder's storyboards on where the story might have gone later on, but I mean, come on. I don't want to see the cinematic epic continue on the walls of a museum. I want to see it in a movie or a show or something directed by Snyder. It's been said that maybe the father of Lois's child is Batman, but again, we don't have conclusive answers. Another smaller example at a promise set up by Snyder turned into a lie because of WB. Zack Snyder's Justice League is a tale of an amazing film coming out at the wrong time. I'm sure if this version of the film was released in theaters in 2017, it would have made gangbusters loads of money, and it surely would have been better received than the theatrical cut. It hurts to know that we could have gotten more by now. We could have gotten answers in future films. Snyder's DC plan was something that always had a conclusion. He had a beginning, he had a middle, and he had an end in mind. We're only at the beginning of that end when it comes to Zack Snyder's DC saga, and it sucks that because of the state of the world, because of the drama going on with Ray Fisher as a result of the Justice League's toxic reshoot environment, the will he won't he be back as Superman from Henry Cavill, and the Robert Pattinson Batman film establishing a new DC cinematic universe, a sequel to Zack Snyder's Justice League isn't a guarantee, at least for now. And Warner Media CEO On Sarnoff kind of makes it seem like it's off the table, but I hope not. WB used to always say the Snyder Cut would never be released, and look what happened. I really hope the Snyderverse is restored. I hope there's more to come. I hope we get conclusions to all these stories that were set up in this film. Sure, so much has changed since 2017, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. I'm sure Ben would come back for Snyder because he came back to film that additional scene. I'm sure Gal, Jason, and Nazareth would also be back in a heartbeat too. Henry Cavill I'm not so sure about, and I really hope the whole Superman drama with him is resolved. But again, for now, the Snyder Cut remains a beautiful film with gorgeous cinematography, wonderful characters and arcs, and amazing action and spectacle. But as a result of studio fear and studio stupidity, it's a film that's a beautiful lie. Thank you for making it to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, give me a like, comment your thoughts on Zack Snyder's Justice League, what did you think about the movie in comparison to the theatrical cut, and subscribe for more. But more importantly, #restore the Snyderverse.